But one thing specifically, Jay, that we want to talk about today is the lunar vehicle, not the module, but that's in relation to some of the stuff we're going to talk about. But the actual buggy.
Yeah, the buggy, the rover.
The rover, yes.
Yeah, the rover and the module, but the rover in particular.
Yeah, we want to talk about the rover. You want to go through the process, and we actually have an article from Popular Science.
Popular Liars, Science.
Made famous by their 9/11 articles.
Yeah, those guys.
They go through a really detailed article here debunking conspiracy theorists, talking about the lunar rover, designing and unpacking a car on the moon. And once again, just like some of the 9/11 stuff, they sort of raise more questions than answer the questions they're trying to snuff out the fires about.
Right.
No pun intended.
No, of course not. Or the snuff. Snuff out, right?
I got what you're saying.
Yeah, but no, it's very interesting because what we found in here was a document from 1970, I believe, from NASA with a lunar roving vehicle operations handbook. And they had this nice little 6-step diagram, A through F, just like putting together a quick little play set for the kids that you bought at Walmart.
This is
right?
more detailed than what IKEA tells you to do.
True that. You're right. But this actually tells you in 6 easy steps how to set up your module, your rover, how to unpack it from the lunar module and have a ready-to-go buggy in 6 easy steps. And one thing you'll notice is that as the astronauts, takes 2 of them to pull the cables down. As they pull it down and it pops open, as it hits the surface of the moon, the wheels are already on, according to this diagram from NASA. But when we look at the picture of the buggy, what do we see?
Well, let's back up 1 second. I have a question about this 463-pound vehicle, and there was that Rocketdyne scientist that talked about Neil Armstrong test flying the LEM, the lunar landing module, and he said if you just move your butt like a quarter of an inch, you're gonna. And he actually ejected in one of the test flights of that. So you put however many astronauts that are anywhere from 150 to 185 pounds, let's say, at the time, and then you put a vehicle that weighs almost 500 pounds in there. Now I saw pictures of it. I couldn't see where you would even store a vehicle that size, folded up or not.
No,
that's the first question before we even get to the rover being. I keep wanting to say module too.
I know.
Before getting the rover onto the surface, getting it up there and having, the thrust and having the power to do something like that.
Yeah, and I read somewhere where they actually, speaking of the thrust and the power and the trajectory, if you will, and how sensitive it was. I read somewhere that on one of the Apollo missions, they left the rover on the moon. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so on the way back in the module, you're 500 pounds lighter.
Correct.
So that wouldn't affect your trajectory at some point? I don't know. I think it would, right? Because you're coming down with the rover and the 2 astronauts. You're going up without the rover.
Well, that's why it just miraculously went up without any thrust.
Cool, right? That's why they didn't need the thrust, because they lost the buggy.
Yeah, there was no crater or anything. So
gotcha. But yeah, of course, naturally. But you pointed this out to me earlier, and I know other moon hoax theorists have as well. But when you look at several of these pictures of the buggy, we notice something about the tires and the moon dust.
Well, there's 2 things. The number one thing which people know about is that there's no tracks. And what you described, which is how they unfolded and unpack the rover, there should be some tire tracks. Now, in relation to that, point number 2 or exhibit 2 of this is that none of these pictures are anywhere near the landing module.
Yes.
So you're not seeing any tracks, and you're not seeing the module where it was unpacked and rolled out onto there. So there should be, at least in most of these pictures, one which the Earth, my God, it looks photoshopped as hell. But
yeah. Well, in looking at this, if you ask the guys at Popular Science or whomever, hey, where are the tracks? Their answer could be, well, it was set up right there and it hadn't rolled yet, right?
Correct.
But if that were the case, we can tell by this NASA diagram on how to get your little buggy out of the lunar module, then the module would be right there. I mean, it would be right there next to it, because the only time you wouldn't have those tracks is right when you pulled it out. So if that's the case, what'd they do? Move the module out of the way for the picture? No, well, they would have rolled it. Well, okay, then where are the tracks?
And it wasn't a separate container. Well, of course, then you're saying, how the hell did you rocket up a container and then land it? And the container should be in the shot as well.
Right. So I guess the overall point we're getting at here is, in this picture of this rover, there should be either tracks present in the dust or the lunar module right next to it as it was unpacked. Not neither.
Well, you did make a point too. This is almost 500 pounds, 463, I think, 463 pounds. So that could not make tracks, but a certain other thing up on the moon that had tracks did make very heavy tracks in the surface.
Yeah, the astronauts.
Yeah.
I mean, the astronauts themselves. You can look at this picture right here and see all of those footprints around it. So let's just say the answer to the where are the tracks from the buggy question someone says is, oh, well, it blew off. It blew away. They don't stay. Oh, okay. Well, then the tracks from the astronauts stay, but not the tracks from the buggy, which is heavier?
And they were deep.
Right.
Deep boot tracks.
Right. Yeah. So that doesn't make sense.
Oh, let's make this point too. The astronauts were in the rover.
Oh, yeah.
So you have even more weight in the
That's
rover.
right. So if one guy drives the buggy, you're talking about 600 to 700 pounds, in this buggy right here. So my question is where are the tracks? And if there's no tracks present, where is the lunar module? Show me one of those two, and I'll believe that this buggy is on the
NASA claims that during the Nixon administration, between the years 1969 and 1972, 12 astronauts walked on the surface of the moon and returned safely to Earth. This event was even commemorated on 2 United States coins, the Susan B. Anthony dollar, which was minted from 1979 to 1981, and then again in 1999, and the Eisenhower dollar, which was minted from 1971 to 1978. The reverse sides of both of these coins were based on the Apollo 11 insignia and show an eagle landing on the moon with the Earth in the background.
Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
The belief that men actually walked on the moon is shared by the vast majority of the world's population. there are no high-profile scientists, astronauts, or officials that have openly expressed any doubt as to the reality of this alleged accomplishment. The only exception to this is former United States President William Jefferson Clinton. In his autobiography, My Life, published in 2004, he states on page 156, "Just a month before, Apollo 11 astronauts Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong had left their colleague Michael Collins aboard Spaceship Columbia and walked on the moon, beating by 5 months President Kennedy's goal of putting a man on the moon before the decade was out. The old carpenter asked me if I really believed it had happened. I said sure, I saw it on television. He disagreed. He said that he didn't believe it for a minute, that them television fellers could make things look real that weren't. Back then I thought he was a crank. During my 8 years in Washington, I saw some things on TV that made me wonder if he wasn't ahead of his time." To simplify, what Clinton says is that a gentleman expressed doubt in the Apollo claims, and he wonders whether that gentleman was correct. Now, exactly what is a former two-term United States president doing, wondering about the authenticity of the greatest technological achievement in the history of mankind? An event that had marked the legacy of his own boyhood hero, JFK.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Obviously, he has some reason to believe that the moon landings were not authentic. If a former US president is wondering about the authenticity of the claim, does it not make sense that you should wonder too? One can imagine why a former president would not want to come right out and blow the whistle by unequivocally stating his true beliefs. But he did, probably for the sake of his legacy, want to have it recorded that he did subtly flag the issue for those paying attention, and he flagged it by using the old carpenter acquaintance to get his point across. Regardless of precisely how much time Mr. Clinton actually spends wondering about this, a closer examination of the claim reveals that to have performed such a feat in 1969 completely contradicts the evidence and otherwise offends common sense.
Port stage pushed. Engine arm is destined. Okay, I'm going to get the pro. 99, proceeded. 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Run away, Houston. Vector good. Ag start. Good over.
The last alleged mission to the moon was Apollo 17, which NASA says took place in December of 1972. Since then, absolutely no country claims to have sent astronauts or even animals more than 400 miles above the surface of the Earth. In recent years, Space Shuttle astronauts completed a trip wherein they attained a maximum altitude of 365 miles. Normally, the Space Shuttle orbits at an altitude of approximately 200 miles from the Earth, the same orbit altitude of the International Space Station. Now, you might be asking, why exactly is this maximum distance from Earth relevant to our discussion? Well, let's put it this way. The Moon is 240,000 miles away from the Earth. The diameter of the Earth is 8,000 miles. This puts the Moon at about 30 Earth diameters away. In relation to the Space Shuttle's orbit on this scale, it has never traveled more than 1/2 of 1 inch away from the Earth's surface.
Six, 5, 3 main engines up and burning, 2, 1, and liftoff.
Just getting into orbit is no small feat, as is illustrated by the fact that in all of recorded history, only 3 countries, the United States, China, and Russia, have been able to put a human just into orbit and never being more than 400 miles from Earth. The explanation for this has always been that, except for these 3 countries, every other country in the world has been too cheap and lazy to venture into just Earth orbit. In reality, the reason has to do with the difficulty in accomplishing this. This most of all drives home the point that NASA's claim of sending men on a 240,000-mile trip in 1969, some 600 times further than they can send men today, is just not plausible. Try to imagine the flight pattern of the Apollo moon missions. NASA says that 3 astronauts took off in a multi-stage rocket, and then 3 days later were in lunar orbit some 60 miles above the moon's surface, going about 4,000 miles per hour, or a little over Mach 6. Then, the spacecraft separated into 2 modules. 1 astronaut stayed in lunar orbit in the CSM. The other 2 flew down to the surface of the moon in the lunar module.
10 feet. Contact. Engine stop. Okay, Houston, the Challenger has landed.
The first question that immediately comes to mind is how they were able to design a craft on Earth that would perform so well under quite different conditions on the moon, namely in a vacuum and in 1/6 gravity, without killing anyone. The Lunar Landing Research Vehicle used to train the astronauts for a landing had a jet engine, which of course would never have worked out in the vacuum of space. NASA's answer to this is that the simulator provided 5/6 or 83% of the propulsion to simulate the amount of thrust that the rocket engine would need to lift the craft while flying down to the surface of the moon. This would be using 83% of Earth's propulsion requirements to adjust for an environment with only 17% of the Earth's gravity? Explanations such as this certainly drive home the point that no matter how convoluted, they will always have a rationalization for everything. By 1961, Nazi rocket scientists such as von Braun maintained a close relationship with President John F. Kennedy as he moved to fulfill his promise to land Americans on the moon before the end of 1969. Yet today, NASA says it will be 2018 before we go back to the moon, despite having supposedly been there over 35 years ago.
It is time for America to take the next steps. Today I announce a new plan to explore space and extend a human presence across our solar system. We will begin the effort quickly, using existing programs and personnel. We will make steady progress, 1 mission, 1 voyage, 1 landing at a time. Our third goal is to return to the moon by 2020 as the launching point for missions beyond. Beginning no later than 2008, we will send a series of robotic missions to the lunar surface to research and prepare for future human exploration. Using the Crew Exploration Vehicle, we will undertake extended human missions to the moon as early as 2015, with the goal of living and working there for increasingly extended periods of time.
Would we ever consider it reasonable if there were a 40-year span between the first and second trips across the Atlantic Ocean? Why such a late date? In 1953, von Braun wrote a book on how to get to the moon, titled Conquest of the Moon. On page 14 of his book, he states, "It is commonly believed that man will fly directly from the Earth to the moon, but to do this, we would require a vehicle of such gigantic proportions that it would prove an economic impossibility. It would have to develop sufficient speed to penetrate the atmosphere and overcome the Earth's gravity, and, having traveled all the way to the moon, it must still have enough fuel to land safely and make the return trip to Earth. Furthermore, in order to give the expedition a margin of safety, we would not use 1 ship alone, but a minimum of 3. Calculations have been carefully worked out on the type of vehicle we would need for the non-stop flight from the Earth to the moon in return. The figures speak for themselves. Each rocket ship would be taller than New York's Empire State Building, 1,250 feet, and weigh about 10 times the tonnage of the Queen Mary, or some 800,000 tons. The Apollo program's three-stage Saturn V was only 3,000 tons. The Saturn V was 266 times smaller than it had to be. Von Braun was certain that the way to get to the moon would first require that a space station be built, with the rocket parts being ferried there for final construction.
Our first goal is to complete the International Space Station by 2010. We will finish what we have started. We will meet our obligations to our 15 international partners on this project. We will focus our future research aboard the station on the long-term effects of space travel on human biology. Research on board the station and here on Earth will help us better understand and overcome the obstacles that limit exploration. Through these efforts, we will develop the skills and techniques necessary to sustain further space exploration.
The constructed vehicle would then launch from the Earth's orbit rather than its surface. The Saturn V used only 3 fuels: liquid oxygen and kerosene in the first stage, and liquid oxygen and hydrogen in the upper stages. No exotic new fuels were invented to bring down the fuel requirement.
I've got a book telling me I didn't go to the moon, that thick, okay? There's a book there when you can't see stars in the daytime and the shadows in around. I don't give a damn about all that.
Remember too, while the thousands of NASA employees did help them achieve Earth orbit, beyond that, all information fed to the press and public was from the government, and there was no independent reporting.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
But is there a smoking gun? Yes, there is. It has to do with the camera shots of the Earth.
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Okay, Roger. Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, did you copy? Over.
Although it is likely that the astronauts were on the Saturn V rocket when it took off, it seems that they stayed in low Earth orbit for the duration of their missions. This provided them with the zero-gravity filming environment, which would be what one would expect on a trip to the moon. They may also have done dives in a KC-135 to get the zero-gravity shots. Yet there is one segment that clearly shows the behind-the-scenes chicanery that is going on. At one point, the crew says they are 130,000 miles out, or just halfway to the moon.
Roger, Houston, Apollo 11. Calling in from about 130,000 miles out. And we'll zoom our camera in slowly.
They say that they have the camera pointing toward the only window that is facing the Earth.
Unfortunately, we only have one window that has a view of the Earth, and it's filled up with the TV camera, so your view now is probably better than ours is.
Yet you see something come between the camera and the Earth.
South America becomes invisible just off beyond the Terminator or inside the shadow.
They are caught in a lie right there. Had the camera been in the window as they stated, then nothing should be coming between the camera and the Earth. We should not see any light in the upper left corner of the screen either. Of course, whenever the Earth was clearly seen vanishing behind the window, the view of the Earth was always from a cutaway shot, in which no astronauts were present.
Well, that's about all is reasonable without getting hot and sweaty. All right, Roger, we copy.
In this circumstance, it was probably a globe on the outside of a mock command capsule in a studio environment. But in this other video, it is easy to see how a different method of trick photography was used. They had placed a transparency over the window to make the window look like the Earth. You can actually see a corner of this transparency pulled away from the window when the lights come on.
Coming in, can't quite make out who that had. That's Big Mike Collins there. Well, you got a little bit of... Yeah, hello there, sports fans. You got a little bit of me, plus Neil's in the center couch, and Buzz is doing the camera work this time. Roger, it's a little dark now, 11. Maybe a bigger f-stop might help.
This is, what is this? Oh, this is a shot from 130,000 miles out. I guess it's from approaching. It's from approaching the moon, looking back at the Earth. Now, I've seen this on a couple of flights. Was this something that you got? Although this is from Apollo 11, did you shoot a shot of the Earth like this? So you had a TV camera in the spacecraft.
That's correct.
And this is, I guess, the Earth zoomed in at a distance.
Yep, seems to be.
They get shot a little bit halfway to the moon. Now it's kind of, now I guess the cloud cover looks.
That's what you're looking at.
Now what is that right there?
What is what?
There's like an arm. It looks like hair on an arm getting in front of the window.
Maybe somebody got their arm in front
Now
of
I
it.
thought that was the arm of God moving
Right.
across the Earth. I couldn't quite figure that out.
I suspect that was the edge of the window, more than likely, that they were shooting at.
What did the Earth look like from a great distance? There
About
it is
like
again,
that.
130,000 miles out.
About like that.
So it's pretty small at the distance of the moon?
Yes, but I think the better images are the Hasselblad images that have been taken on every flight and are the most published pictures in the history of the world.
What is that in the top left? If that's the Earth, is that like another spacecraft?
No. That, I have no idea what that is. It's some aberration on the film of some sort. Oh, those are shadows, I think. Or reflections, probably reflections that are just reflecting.
Run that back again so we get another shot of it.
If you're going to press me on this, I'm not going to talk to you anymore because I won't pursue this. All of this attempt to say the Apollo programs were fake is just sheer nonsense. And you can talk till hell freezes over and you're wrong. Okay?
Well, would you affirm?
I won't continue on this line. Okay, turn off the camera. Your interview is done. I've given you all the time I'm going to give you.
Okie dokie. Good to meet you.
I don't say it's a pleasure.
Understand.
Please get your ass out of my house.
Okay.
And you came here under false pretenses, and I think you're an asshole.
Well,
and if you continue this, and if you press us, I will personally take you to court.
I hope that you do. I invite you to. I'm going to give you my card so you can arrange that. And I'm encouraging you to arrange.
You're frankly not worth it.
No, we have you on the record saying you'll take me to court. I hope you do. Because we have proof that would prove it in a court of law that Apollo 11 didn't go to the moon. And I think it's something that you should see. I don't say that lightly, believe me. I don't say it lightly.
You have joking, sir. People can have fun. And maybe do that if they feel like they want to have a little fun on a trip to the moon. As an independent producer,
Okay, we're heading out.
doing that is against moral ethics.
Lying about going to the moon is a satanic lie of gigantic proportions.
I don't hit people, but you're going to be on the deck unless you get...
I'm heading out. I appreciate it.
And get the hell out of the Black House. You get a gun and shoot them at them before they get out of the office?
We have a video camera running if you want to do it.
Right.
That would be great footage for us. See you later. In court, I hope.
Want to call the CIA? Have them whacked.
So I'm prompting you.
That is why they wanted the interior.
You believe in UFOs?
You believe we've been visited by? Well, why do you want to believe this?
I know for a fact. I've had this analyzed, and this is the window, and it's dated by an atomic clock at the Goldstone tracking station, which is on the tape.
Well, you're talking to the wrong guy. Why don't you talk to the administrator at NASA? We're passengers. We're guys going on a flight. We're not.
I know for a fact that it didn't happen. What did the Earth look like from a great distance? There it is again, 130,000 miles out.
About like that.
So it's pretty small at the distance of the moon?
Yes, but I think the better image.
Buzz Aldrin's violent reaction is not surprising, considering the hundreds of thousands of dollars he has made by defrauding people, selling his personal memorabilia. According to the winter 2008 issue of Heritage Magazine, in September of 2007, Aldrin sold the following items which he claimed were flown to the moon. A medallion for $15,535, a silver dollar for $31,070, a chart for $71,700, and a handwritten note for $179,250. Not all of the Apollo astronauts profiteer off this lie, but Aldrin is certainly the worst offender.
Mr. Armstrong, Bart Sibrel, ABC Digital. Wanted to give you the opportunity to swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon. Will you put your left hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Gentlemen. Mr. Sibrel.
Yes? If you really walked on the moon, why would you not do that? So why don't you just put the into the record in the argument and put your hand on the Bible, swear to God you walked on the moon.
Mr. Sibrel, knowing you, that's probably a fake Bible.
Really? Well, no, it's a real Bible. You have the opportunity to have $5,000.
The meeting is not open.
Well, you have $5,000 cash. You can give it to charity if you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon.
Please
I have
give
the
it to
tape.
charity. It'd be fine.
Why don't you swear to? Why not? Why won't you do it? So why don't you put your hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Mr. Sibrel has made a fool of himself in front of the world.
Now, if you want to not believe it, it's okay, you know? It's okay. It's a better story. It just happens to be a lie, that's all.
I probably would have done what the other 6 did because I'm just as stubborn as anybody else. And I said, I don't need to prove to you that I went to the moon. I know I went.
Well, I know for a fact you didn't walk on the moon. I've seen the footage.
That's fine. It's okay if you know it. Do you understand that? You can have any opinion you want. That's what's wonderful about this country. You can believe anything you want. And it's okay with me, for sure.
Mr. President, I do want to get right to the news of this week.
Sure.
The terrorism in Boston.
Yeah.
Many people have wondered if it took you right back to 9/11 when you heard it.
Well, at first, I was deeply concerned that there might have been a organized plot. I don't know all the facts. I don't think we all know all the facts, but I was deeply concerned that this could have been another highly organized attack on the country. And it still may be. Again, I don't know the facts, but I do know that it's really hard to protect the homeland.
Now, if you want to not believe it, it's okay, It's okay. It's a better story. It just happens to be a lie, that's all.
I probably would have done what the other 6 did because I'm just as stubborn as anybody else. And I said, I don't need to prove to you that I went to the moon. I know I went.
Well, I know for a fact you didn't walk on the moon. I've seen the footage.
That's fine. It's okay if you know it. Do you understand that? You can have any opinion you want. That's what's wonderful about this country. You can believe anything you want. And it's okay with me, for sure.